guys ever thought about retiring early, right? I mean, the general consensus out there is that you're supposed to wait till what, like 65, 67 years old, and then you retire, and you kind of live the life of your dreams, like way down the road.
That's
you
right.
know what I'm saying?
But we want to bring someone on the show today that is actually living the life of retirement in their 30s. He and his wife are in their 30s.
Wait, how old are they?
They're in their 30s.
They must have won the lottery or something.
And they visit over 40 countries combined.
Did they win the lotto or something? How they retire in their 30s?
No. Well, I say let's get him on and let's talk to him about it so he can let us know how he did it.
All right, let's go get Jeremy. Let's get him on the line. Hey, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're great.
All right, we're so happy that you took out time to come on the show today because you have quite the story of retiring early. And when I mean retiring early, you retired early. But before we jump into the details of your story, can you give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. We are traveling the world. Between the two of us, we've been to over 40 different countries. We are currently expecting a little one. Winnie is almost 8 months pregnant. And we have not worked for almost 3 years now and don't plan to do so ever again.
That is amazing. You all said that you all have visited over 40 countries.
That's right. Yeah. Since we so-called retired, we've been to, I think, 7. But in the working years and vacations before that, a total of about 40.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, the retirement. Now, you guys are in your 30s and you are retired. How did you even come to that decision?
Well, let's see. It started with a little bit of just feeling sort of frustrated with the restraints of having a typical job. When you're kids, you have every summer off. Every sort of semester in school, you might have a week or two off. And then suddenly one day, you're an adult and you're expected that, hey, you have to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week and you might get 2 weeks of vacation a year. And we both really love to travel, and it's near impossible to kind of pursue that passion while also contributing the majority of your waking hours to a typical job. So we just started looking for ways that we could pursue the travel more and the work less.
Now, this whole early retirement phenomenon is new to me. I first heard about it from Mr. Money Mustache, which is a great website that everybody should check out. But, the concept is kind of mind blowing. I mean, most people think of retirement. They think about being in their 60s and having enough money to get by on for the rest of their life. Why do you feel that this doesn't have to be the case, that you don't just have to wait till you get to a certain age, 65 and up, so to speak?
I guess the normal cost of living that you can experience in the U.S., if you really focus on trying to minimize it, can be really quite inexpensive. And so sometime in the last over 50 years or so, as salaries rose and cost of living declined and access to investments sort of became mainstream, people are able to save a very large percentage of income. For a while, we were saving 70+%. Right? And when you're doing a typical sort of recommended, say, 10% sort of retirement rate, the 10% savings rate, after you've worked 10 years, you really have maybe enough savings to fund 1 year of life. So if you quit working right then, you could get by for a year and then you'd have to go back to work again. But if you're saving on the other extreme, say 70-some%, within 15 years, you really have enough to fund your lifestyle forever. So if somebody is motivated to do so, it's possible to save a very high percentage and then let those investments run, and you're free to do what you like.
What was it for you and your wife that you guys made it a point to set this as a goal? I mean, what triggered it? I mean, most, 20, 30-year-olds aren't walking around thinking about, hey, you know what, let's put away a bunch of money and retire. Like, what was it that set you on this path?
There was a time, like early career, where I guess I had my first sort of real adult vacation, and I had been working tremendous hours in the years up to that, and probably described me as a workaholic. I had this 3-week vacation, and it was actually very difficult the first week. Right, I was constantly thinking about work, and my mind was elsewhere. And then around week number 2, it sort of started to feel comfortable. Hey, this is pretty nice. And then by the end of the 3rd week, I was starting to think, how can I do this every day for the rest of my life? so from there, I started looking for examples of people who'd done it, because even at that time, I was thinking like this is not possible. Nobody can really do this. And you'd hear stories of people who did it, and you try to find the flaws and like what are they lying about? What's not correct? And then it just sort of dawned like this not only is possible, it's actually a quite simple thing to implement. Not easy, but simple.
We forgot to mention, right now, currently, you guys are doing this interview, and where are you at currently?
We are in Taiwan.
Did you hear that? Taiwan, in their early 30s, okay? That is amazing. Let me ask you guys this. Is this realistic for someone with an average income, or do you need to be a high income earner in order to retire early and save that much money?
It's definitely easier if you make a very high income, but what it really comes down to is what percentage of your income are you saving?
Right.
There are people making ridiculous salaries, but they spend it all.
True.
Right, and you get accustomed to some sort of higher cost of living and lifestyle inflation, and it becomes quite difficult to then sort of spend less and go backwards. And it's sort of not a normal sort of comfortable thing to do. But on the other extreme, if somebody's deep in debt and the income is sort of below kind of U.S. median and so on, saving 50-70% of income can be difficult. Although there are many examples that you can read on the web of people who do it.
Now, let me ask you this. Were both of you guys on board at the same time? How was that experience? Did you come up with this idea first and did you present it to her? And how was her response or her reaction?
Largely, it was originally me bringing the idea up, and it took her about 5 seconds of thinking about it, and then she said, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, you guys set the goal and you said, let's do this. We're going to retire early. You mapped it out. So what were some things, practically speaking, like what were some things that you did in order to be able to save 70% of your income and get enough money saved up in order to live this retirement lifestyle?
If you look at sort of where most people spend the majority of their income, there's taxes, and then it's typically housing, transportation, and food. So I really looked at those four things. How can you minimize taxes? How do we spend less on transportation, food, and housing? And while you're working, it's actually quite difficult to minimize taxes. You can contribute to tax-deferred savings plans like 401ks and traditional IRAs, but your options are largely limited there. So we started focusing on the things that we had direct control of. Where do we live? And so for a time, we lived in like a 350 square foot apartment in Chinatown in Seattle and did not like it. It wasn't a great fit, but we kind of pushed it as far down as we could go, just to try it and see what it was like. And we'd never lived in anything that small. It was sort of unfair to assume that it wouldn't be a good fit, so we tried it. And we wanted more space, and so we found a nice place in a very walkable neighborhood that was more like $900 a month. And we very consciously picked the location on a map. Like I looked at bus routes to the office and the ability to walk everywhere. So we were a block from a grocery store, a block from a farmer's market, 4 or 5 blocks from a library, a few blocks from a park. And so by choosing where we lived with easy access to everything, we never had to drive, and therefore we didn't have a car. And then I started most days biking to work. This kind of has a double positive effect of, I'm in way better shape, right? So you're going to spend less on doctor visits and so on in the long term, but reduce stress, and I was essentially commuting for free. And then because we were a block from a farmer's market, we had access to, all the really cool hipster buzzwords in food, local, seasonal, fresh, organic. And Winnie stopped working before I did, and she started kind of taking on projects like working through sort of the renowned French and Italian cookbooks. And so she just started sort of building up her cooking skills, and to the point where I would put her against, any chef anywhere, and, people will love her food, right? So when you're able to eat at home for just a fraction of the price of eating out, and the quality is better than what you'd have eating out, you just don't eat out much. Right. And so the combination of all of those things together made it so that our monthly spending was pretty low.
Now, how long from the point where you guys made this a goal to the point where you both were fully retired? How long did it take you to save up enough money to retire?
My whole career was about 16 years, and we sort of made the commitment about 6 years in. So the total time then, I had student loan debt and so on at the beginning and took time to pay that off. But from the day we committed to the day I actually retired was actually 10 years and 1 day. And in hindsight, we probably could have quit sooner, probably 2 or 3 years earlier, because I was largely ended up saving 100% of my salary the last couple of years.
I heard you mention that you had student loan debt. So for someone who is in debt, should they try to get out of debt first and then start saving up their nest egg? How did you approach that?
In general, this is largely a personality thing. Some people are much more emotional about dollars and cents than I am. Okay, so I just looked at it purely from a mathematical standpoint. I could get like a 15 to 25% tax deduction by contributing to the 401k plus a few percent match. And so I focused largely on at least contributing enough to my 401k to get the match, to get the maximum match. And then after that, focused on paying down the student loan debt. When I graduated, my student loan debts were something like 7-8% interest rates or so. When my brother graduated from college, his student loan interest rates were something like 1.5%. And so what I recommended to him is that he just pay the minimum and never pay it off as long as he could. Just let, sort of typical 2-3% inflation just destroy that debt for him. So it largely depends on kind of the combination of interest rates that you have available to you. But for somebody that's comfortable just using the raw logic and the math, I would put the money wherever it makes the greatest long-term sort of ROI.
Now let's keep talking about math. Now, for those listening, Ty and I included, how do we do the math and say, okay, this is the target number that we need to save up in order to hit retirement? Like maybe, some listener can't retire in their 30s, but maybe they don't want to get to 65. Maybe they want to retire at 50 or 45 or something like that. Like, how do they map it out to figure out how much money they need to put away in order to make it a reality?
So the general rule of thumb, there was a study done by a trio of professors at Trinity University sometime in the 80s, 90s. They looked at the historical return of stocks, bonds, commodities, etc., and they came up with a rule called that now is referred to often as the 4% rule. And what that basically says is that you can spend 4% of your portfolio every year, adjusted for inflation, and 99 times out of 100. Your money will outlive you. And that's a great rule of thumb. It's largely what we use as a starting point. So if you think about what that means is if your spending is $20,000 a year, then you need to have $500,000 saved. If it's $40,000 a year, you need to have $1 million, and so on.
Were there any obstacles that you all had to overcome during this period of you guys trying to build up your retirement nest egg?
I think largely the obstacles were knowledge. Okay? We had to learn how to invest. We had to kind of test our own boundaries of how little are we willing to spend and still be happy or maximize our happiness even. So it was just we didn't have the knowledge of how much do we need to save, how little can we spend, and so on. And so we just had to experiment with it. Other than the overcoming our own sort of saving and learning how to invest limitations, it was largely just to make a commitment and go at it.
So now over this 10-year period where you guys were putting away a bunch of money, like what vehicles were you using to save the money and to help it grow?
Most of our money is in 2 different stock funds. There's both with Vanguard. There's just the larger, broader. Yeah, Vanguard is fantastic. Mm-hmm. It's just the broad market index, the VTI, ETF, and then the international broad market, which is VEU. And then we have a little bit in the Vanguard REIT fund and a little bit in their general bond fund.
So basically all index funds.
All index funds, and 90% of it's in equities.
And you're going to maintain that same level of risk for a while? Or you're going to taper off a little bit?
No, I'm actually interested in going towards 100% stock.
Wow.
And here's there is risk in everything, right? And this is the way I think about it, though. I would, if I look at 2008, we lost something like $400,000. But as long as we don't need to sell those funds for living, there's no problem with that. And actually, it's a great thing because any additional income we can use to buy things on sale, right? Mm-hmm. And when I'm looking at, we're probably looking at a 60-year retirement. And so risk for us is not, does our portfolio have more volatility than somebody else's portfolio with more bonds? It's do those funds out survive us? And for the idea of having like the largest possible portfolio at death, stocks are going to provide us with the highest probability of success. And so, if the stock market dropped 50% tomorrow, I would still sleep fine. We'd still eat. We'd still be traveling. We would just, maybe our next destination, instead of being Paris, is Costa Rica, where we can spend half as much.
With the new baby on the way, do you guys still see yourself, traveling at a, fast pace? Or are you guys going to try to settle down in one place, or just take the baby with you all, and just continue to travel the world and see everything? Does that change anything at all, having a family?
Yeah, I think it changes it, but we don't know how yet.
Right.
So we're not fast travelers anyway, right? Like the first 2 years, the first year, 9 months of it was in Mexico, right? So we didn't make it very far. But, we were able to sort of immerse ourselves in culture and make local friends and truly live in another place as opposed to just being there. And we were in Taiwan now because we chose it as a location we needed a little assistance. So we got IVF therapy here. We picked it for a couple of reasons. One is that it was going to cost us 20% of the price of U.S. prices to do it here. And so we came here, we went through that process, and then we decided to stay. Winnie's from here originally, so we decided to stay through the time the baby's born. And then when he's 6 months old, we plan to hit the road again. We'll get him his own little backpack.
Oh, I love it.
We're not yet sure where. Some little hiking boots.
Right.
And we're not really sure where we're going to go yet. But we're talking about possibly back to Mexico. We're talking about possibly to Europe. We'll just have to kind of see. And we want to get a feel for his personality. Is he going to be? Are we going to be those people on the plane with the screaming kid for 12 hours? Or
well, shockingly enough, we took all three of our children on a plane ride for the first time last July. Was it? Yeah, it was about July. And believe it or not, they surprised us. Even how old was she? She was 1. Our 1-year-old, they were fine. I think I was more of a nervous wreck than they were, and they did pretty good. Yes. Yeah. So I have a fun trivia question just to throw in here a little bit. Now, out of all the places that you guys have visited, where's your top destination that you thoroughly enjoyed the most and you wouldn't mind seeing yourself kind of settling down there?
That's a lot like asking me what my favorite flavor of ice cream is.
Give us the top 2, baby.
I like chocolate. I like vanilla, But we really loved, there's a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Mexico. The entire town is a World Heritage Site called San Miguel de Allende. And it's just a beautiful colonial town with cobblestone streets and colorful buildings and kind of a beautiful mix of expats and locals. And we spent 6 months there. When we first got there, we looked at each other and said, what do you think? 2 weeks and we're kind of bored with this place. It's small. And then a few months later, we had to make ourselves leave. Otherwise, we'd be stuck there. We'd be stuck there forever. But that's a possible. We talked about actually even possibly buying a small home there and using it as a base. But then there's also, we have some family around Santa Cruz, California, which is a beautiful area. We could see that. And then Winnie hasn't been yet, but we're trying to figure out when we go. But my favorite city that I've ever been to was Barcelona, Spain, and I could see that also being a destination.
Nice.
Now, Jeremy, I'm sitting here thinking about all this early retirement stuff, and I'm getting fired up, right? But being that you guys are so young and you retired, aren't you guys going to get slammed with penalties for withdrawing the money before 59 and a half years old?
You would think so, right? So, but it's actually kind of the opposite. We actually expect that we will, over the next 30 years or so, have something like $3 million in investment income and pays $0 in tax.
Zero.
Wow.
Zero?
Zero.
Okay, I'm all ears now.
So one of the most popular posts on our blog is called Never Pay Taxes Again. And it outlines our overall strategy for not paying taxes. Legally, respectfully. And I also published our 2013 tax return on the blog so people can see exactly what we did. But for your question specifically about pulling money out of the retirement accounts before 59 and a half, there are several methods to withdraw funds before 59 and a half without paying a penalty. There's the 72T section of the 401k code that outlines them, but you can take a series of substantially equal periodic payments, or you can do what's called a Roth IRA conversion ladder. And because you have sort of a certain amount of income you can make every year tax-free, everybody can because of standard deductions and personal exemptions. You can withdraw specific amounts each year while paying zero tax, and then possibly live off of funds from your taxable account and so on. But as long as your overall marginal rate is below 15%, any qualified dividends or any long-term capital gains are taxed at 0%. And so our 2013 tax return shows something like around 15K in Roth IRA conversion, about 20-some K in qualified dividends, and about 40K in long-term capital gains that I harvested for this very purpose. And so our adjusted gross income on there is something like a little over $90,000. And then the little box at the end that says tax due is a big fat zero.
Now, I want to make mention to our listeners, we will include the post that he mentioned in the show notes, the post about never pay taxes again, and as well as his 2013 tax returns, okay? Knowledge is key. That's it. So the question I have also for you guys now, you said that you have this baby on the way. Let's talk about health insurance. How do you handle that, being that you don't work for a company anymore? How are you guys, tackling the health insurance issue? Are you paying for everything out of pocket? How are you doing that?
Before the Affordable Care Act became law, with all the ability of insurance companies to deny you for pre-existing conditions, we carried a policy, just a high deductible health insurance plan. And it was something like $230 a month. It was not a huge amount, but we would never be able to use it. It was solely for the purpose of, if we were in the U.S. and it prevented us from being stuck outside the system because of a pre-existing condition we might develop. But after the Affordable Care Act, we dumped that. We've largely been self-insured. I had to I would never do that inside the U.S. Like, the U.S. system is a giant mess. Total lack of pricing transparency and multiple tiers of billing that take months to process. And it's just a ridiculous system. But I went to the doctor here in Taiwan. I had a EKG, a chest x-ray, some blood work done, paid cash, and the total bill was about $50.
Wow.
Right? So now Winnie is a Taiwan citizen, and she's on the national health care plan here. And so she has insurance through that. And, but like in the big picture, that doesn't really make much of a difference. Like, we had kind of a scare early on in the pregnancy, and we went to the emergency room late at night, and the total bill was $30.
Wow.
And if we didn't have insurance, it would have been about 60, 70, right? So it's nice to have it, but it doesn't really change things in the grand scheme of things.
Now, what about people here that want to, kind of follow in your footsteps? What would be the best option for them here in the U.S.?
I would purchase a plan on healthcare.gov. And if we go back to the U.S., that's what we'll do. And I largely adopt the philosophy of I want to be my own insurance company, right? So if there's something that a risk that I can afford, I'll just pay for it myself out of pocket when the time comes, unless there's a law requiring otherwise. But like in the U.S., Medicare published their overall payouts from a couple years ago, and you'd see things like somebody having an appendectomy, and just two hospitals like a mile away from each other. The bill from one was like $13,000, and the bill from the other was $75,000. It's the exact same procedure. You don't know going in which bill you're going to get. Whereas in many other parts of the world, you can call up and say, hey, I would like to get an appendectomy. Like, what is the price of that? And they'll tell you. But with that complete sort of lack of pricing transparency in the U.S. and the wide range of prices, I would never self-insure in the U.S. It's like playing Russian roulette. Mm-hmm. You're going to get shot eventually.
Expensive.
But the plans, having a high deductible health plan where if you just have like minor stuff along the way, they're not that expensive. They're a few $100s a month. But what it does prevent is, you get a brain tumor or a cancer and the bill comes into the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, then you only have a bill of 10 or 20K, and that's worth protecting for.
Now, Jeremy, we don't want to wait till we're in our 60s to retire. So for us and the people in the audience listening right now who hear your story and want to get started, what is step one for us?
As with pretty much everything, I think step one is just believing it's possible. Was it Henry Ford said something like, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. If you look at, you mentioned Mr. Money Mustache earlier, wonderful blog. The man has a great vision. When he gets mainstream press, in Washington Post, New York Times, and you go see the comments, 99% of the comments are, this is not possible, this is wrong, this guy's lying, and it's just people don't believe it's possible, and so they put every ounce of energy they can into trying to find a flaw in his example. Where if they turned the lens around a little bit and looked at themselves and said, how can I make changes so that I can do it as well? Right. Now they're getting somewhere. And so step one is believing it's possible. And there are many, we did it one way, and there are many people who've done it before us, and we'll do it afterwards, who've gone a different path. Find one that resonates with you, and then kind of embrace and extend that example or those ideas.
Now, can you tell us about the mission of your site, GoCurryCracker.com?
Originally, the blog started with the idea of, when I left work, people came out of the woodwork to, are you really retiring? Like, what's going on? And they wanted to know how. And so I started the blog for two things: to explain how we did it and help sort of people, my old coworkers, sort of see the light and see that there was another way of doing it. From there, it kind of grew into that same sort of goal, but for everyone. So it's our journey, how we did it, how much it costs to live sort of our lifestyle around the globe, location and financially independent, and hopefully help a few other people achieve similar goals.
Awesome. Jeremy, your story has inspired us. Yes. I know, and I'm sure everybody in the audience is inspired as well. We appreciate you guys taking out time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much, and congrats on your brand new baby boy that will be coming very soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're very excited about that.
There you have it, folks.
Did you hear it? He gave detailed information. That's what I loved, about their interview. Detailed information. Like he said, it's not easy. Don't think that it's easy, but it is doable.
What's key? He said knowledge was the obstacle that he had to overcome. I think that's the obstacle that we all have to overcome. How many people just heard that story and were like, man, we can't do that, man. That's him. That's not me. Why? Why not?
Right.
Why can't you do it? Why can't we do it? Why can't we retire early? Now, maybe, you can't do it in your 30s, but maybe you could do it in your 40s. Maybe you can do it in your 50s. Are you willing to make that sacrifice, Or do you just want to wait till you're 65, 70 years old, barely able to enjoy the retirement that you've been waiting for, man? I mean, I figure that's kind of how I go through life. I look and I say, well, if such and such can get that done, then why can't I?
Right,
I don't look at it as something that's an isolated incident. Because let me tell you, folks, it's people just like Jeremy all across the country that have retired early because they bought into it and they made the sacrifice, they paid the price, and now they're living their dreams right now.
We don't even know the half of them. We might not be able to hear their story. They may not be on the internet for us to read their story or even watch them, but they are out there young. A lot of people that I know, they have a plan and a goal that by the time they hit 30 years old, they're retired.
It's real, folks.
And it's real.
It's real. And you know what? I'm fired up.
Me too.
We're debt free.
Right.
Maybe it's time to kick this savings rate up a bit and retire early like Jeremy and just travel the world, man. What you think? Do you want to go to Mexico?
With a paid off house, I do.
All right. Well, hey, a goal needs to be set. Whether it's retiring early, paying off your house early, getting out of student loan debt early. I think the key that we learned from this story is setting a goal, then putting in the work, and making it happen.
Knowledge is key, people. Knowledge is key.
That does it for this episode of the His and Her Money Show.
That's right. Well, don't forget, visit us over at our website at hisandhermoney.com.
Hey, catch us on Facebook. Hit the like button, facebook.com/hisandhermoney. Here it is. No matter where you are on the road to financial freedom, the key is to start now
and finish strong.
Thanks for tuning in to the His and Her Money Show. For more information on how to win with your finances, be sure to visit www.hisandhermoney.com.